Today, this is proactive cybersecurity, AI-powered threat detection and response for business resilience. I have a panel of experts today that are going to walk us through some of the modern day challenges of cybersecurity in an AI-powered world. I'm going to do my best to keep up with these guys. We've got the real brain trust here today. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, starting off with Aditya.
And Sean, thanks for having me. This is Aditya. I'm the VP of Security Engineering and AI Strategy at Aryaka. Prior to that, I'd hold like senior level roles at F5, Symantec, Blue Coat, and been a part of several successful startups. So been in the cybersecurity industry for a lot, 19 years, and I hope we're gonna have great discussions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Ray, how about you?
I'm sorry. I'm Ray Watson. We'll start off by being unmuted. How about we start off that way, okay? Well, we've already got that in the bingo card. If you're looking for someone not to be muted, then we can just go ahead and check that one off. I'm Ray Watson. I'm the VP of Technology at Comcast Business. I've been in cybersecurity pretty much my entire career. I also do network solutions, etc. And I also co-produce a couple podcasts. I snuck that word podcast in there, Sean, just for you.
You can plug your podcast at the end too, Ray. How about that?
I'm sure that's what everyone really wants. That's what everyone really wants.
That's right. And Sanjay, how about you? Do you have a podcast first?
I know it's Sanjay there. I'm the only guy who doesn't have a podcast or a webinar. I just participate in somebody else's. So that's the simple way of doing this. Over 30 years of IT security experience. Spent the first 10 years working for a defense contractor building cybersecurity systems, or at that time, IT security systems for the three-letter agencies. Spent the next 10 years working on very large-scale enterprise integration. Started the company 14 years ago called 24/7 Security, grew it, and just became a family member of Amplix. We were just acquired about 3 months ago. Enjoying over here. Anything about AI, cybersecurity, all is fair game right now. So thanks for inviting me, Sean, and nice to meet you, Ray and Aditya.
Same here.
Appreciate having you guys. So we've got Comcast Business and Aryaka, two of the leading cybersecurity companies in our portfolio of vendors that we work with, and also happy to have the expertise in-house now through Sanjay and 24/7 and that recent acquisition that Amplix made. So great panel. Really excited to get started. I'm just going to start off with a really big question, and I'm going to start with you, Aditya. But feel free to chime in, anyone else, after he responds. But how would you describe the current cybersecurity threat landscape, particularly in terms of like the speed and the volume and the complexity of the attacks that we're seeing?
Absolutely, Sean. I think that's a very timely question. Before we actually need to go into the threat landscape, I think it is very important to understand the taxonomy of the AI ecosystem. So when I talk about and want to reflect on the AI taxonomy, focusing on a threat landscape, we're going to categorize the AI ecosystem into the three main components. The first one is like backend LLMs. The second is Gen AI apps and services. The third one is infrastructure. Now we rely into the world of AI agents, which is going to fall into the hybrid play of app services and the AI infrastructure. But if we focus on the three big components, you can easily understand the threat landscape. And why I say so, because at the end of the day, when you build security defenses, you need to understand the threat at a granular level. So what is the kind of threats we're going to talk about impacting the LLMs, right? How the AI infrastructure is being compromised and how exactly AI apps, API services are being abused for nefarious purposes. So once we understand that, then we can actually take a look at it, how exactly the threats are being mapped and how exactly those threats are being actually triggered these days. So considering the time speed, take an example of a targeted campaign, right? Earlier, when attackers were there, they usually take a lot of time because they have to write the code themselves. With the AI weaponization concept, where they can actually abuse the power of LLMs to draft subcomponents of those code and then join those subcomponents by doing little modification to create a proper targeted attack campaign. It just for a few days rather than few months. So just imagine and think about it, the variations of those, right? They can actually create tens and hundreds of variation of the similar set of attack. So considering that time speed, I think play a significant role. Adversaries are going after abusing the power of AI. But again, at the end of the day, I always call this an arms race. Whoever's gonna lead it's gonna take control of the play. But the threats are expanding at a rapid pace. And more important, the variation of those attacks, right? I think that's where we are. And I think we're going to see volumes of attacks that are being triggered. think of another example of phishing attack, right? Earlier it was used to like a few hours to draft a simple phishing email, then send it. Now within a 60 seconds, you can draft 30 different or even more than that, right? And then you can send it across, and you can even create SMTP code utilizing that protocol through AI, and then embed everything into one go and push it out in an automated manner. So I think we are entering into the different world of threats right now, and the speed and accuracy gonna matter, which I translate all this back to the automation. So that's where we are right now.
Would you say it's fair to say that not only the kind of industrialization of the threats and the scale and the speed of the threats has been increased by AI, but would you say also the personalization and maybe the believability of these kind of attacks is accelerating with AI?
Absolutely. And then we can actually talk more about on the social engineering aspect of it, not on the individual level, but also the geopolitics level, how exactly this technology is being abused. And at the end of the day, with the world we live in right now is like the believability part, right? How you can create a content that is more believable. And then people can actually kind of go after that and then, make some decisions that are for the benefit of nefarious people. But again, at the end of the day, money matters, right? So some of these attacks are also financially motivated. So the more variations you have, the faster you can overcome the security defenses. I think that's why we term it as the context of arms race.
But in addition, if you think about money matters, there's another aspect to that. And I hate to use the term democratization of attacks or democratization of tools because I really don't think democracy implies that everyone can be threat actors. But for the purposes of this discussion, the types of attacks that we've even seen in this last week 5 years ago would have cost $1 million. Maybe there's a handful of people in the world that could do it, right? These days, it could literally be a 15-year-old kid in his high school just playing around in the computer lab, right? We have access on the defense side to some of these tools as well, which is great. But more importantly, everyone has access to these tools now, and that's going to be what really trying to change this thing. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. A few years ago, there was an open source library that they found a 0-day exploit to that was somewhat disruptive. I'm not even positively sure if I can recall which one it was because there were several, but I think it was SSL related. In the last week, we've seen threat actors who took actually researchers that took Claude and said, I'm going to point this Claude at this vulnerability scan on a public library that thousands of people have been using, and it found over 500 exploits. And so that's a scan that costs nothing that anyone could do, which, okay, that's good. That's good. That means a lot of cybersecurity researchers could do it, but not everyone has good motivations. And I don't think we're ready for that. I don't think we were ready for that last week. I definitely don't think we're going to be ready for it next week as well.
So
That's fantastic one, Trey.
So the barrier to entry is lower, right? Cost
Yes.
is lower. Ease of use is probably lower, less expertise because of AI, faster replication. So all of that equals really exponential acceleration and scale. Do we all agree on that, I assume?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the job of the CISO is exponentially becoming harder and harder because the bad guys have to get it right once, but the cybersecurity team and the CISO's team and the CIO, they have to get it right all the time. And I think that's the battle we are all going through. And I think the bad guys started using AI first. They saw it as a way to basically scale up pretty quickly. And the good thing is, in the last 3 to 5 years, the product engineering teams of various companies have also figured that out, and they're embedding AI into that.
Sure.
So I believe the playing field is getting leveled, but I still believe that because there are state-sponsored attacks, they are much sophisticated, much faster, and much distributed. I think that's basically where the little bit of inequity
Sanjay,
lies.
that's great news. That's great news, man. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. But I've got bad news for you too. If you don't follow the news, in the last 19 days, we've seen the emergence of OpenClaw, OpenJaw, ClawBot, these
There you
bots
go.
that all over the world, even
Yep.
experienced IT people, are basically giving root access to their keys and to their sides and playing with these tools that are immensely powerful. And when I say immensely powerful, I'm not talking about kids experimenting with TNT in their garage. I'm talking about kids experimenting with fusion reactors in their garage, right?
True.
That
Very
level.
true.
And the worst part of it all is that in many cases, it's people like me that are just playing with it and seeing what it is. And I know better than to leave default passwords
True.
on there. but the barrier for entry is basically zero. Okay, maybe a Mac Mini, or maybe you go get an old laptop, right? But it's basically zero, and it can really do some scary stuff. And that's something we didn't really put into our threat landscape a month ago. Not really.
But I think the difficult part of that is how do you take all of that and you translate it into a budget? If I'm a CISO and I'm going to my CFO or my board to ask for more money, so the AI has created a level of velocity of threat landscape that we have not seen before, and it's getting more and more difficult for senior leadership to take all of that, translate it, and ask for more money to basically protect the company assets.
And we're going to get to that. Let's not get ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves, though. I want to go back to Aditya. What I think we've talked about a few of them here, but let's just be specific. What are the threat vectors that are evolving the fastest, and what are businesses most commonly unprepared for?
Yeah. So Sean, when we talk about threat vectors, I always translate back to understand the threat actors, right? What are the threat actors that are playing a part in this? You can categorize into that like enterprise user, disgruntled users, right? And then we talk about adversaries, nation state actors, attackers, financial motivated hackers, and all sort of those actors. But considering if we focus this problem into the context of enterprise, I think when enterprises are consuming AI services or apps in the environment, right, what kind of risk they are posing, like from the shadow AI to kind of the prompts they are throwing, data exfiltration is happening, data leakage is happening. So what are we going to do with it? So that is also one of the important aspects, rather than already always going into the scenario of like attackers and attacking my servers because they're using AI. They are using AI, but what is happening on the other end? Like even if they are creating a malware, like to, through the context of AI weaponization, they create this malware. Again, what's the malware gonna do? It's still gonna make changes into your operating system. So do you have a cybersecurity solutions place here to understand and determine the impact of it? So the more you change, sometimes the things stay the same because it depends on where you're looking at it, looking at the source or you're looking at the destination. What's the impact of it, right? And similarly, if we talk about in the context of enterprise users, as I said, right, the risk is significant there as well. But one of the most important part, what we're saying is that, as I said, like, as Sanjay said, velocity and a momentum that is associated with the AI attacks. Earlier, you have like scans going for like 1 hour, like targeting your critical open SSL services that are being running on the internet for some kind of access you provide. Now it is like 8 hours, 10 hours a day, within, implementing like some kind of stream in between. But at the end of the day, the volume is spiking high. And now your solutions have to be pretty active 24/7, which was the case earlier. But right now, they have to process more data. They have to process more incoming streams of data to understand where the deviations are. So we are into this attack mode where we are actually continuous on the path. But if I take a step back and top 3 attacks I want to talk about it, like the risk the enterprise users are like triggering when they're interacting with the AI apps and services, from shadow AI to data exfiltration and things. Second one is like the way attackers are abusing, AI services or AI apps or all LLMs for generating geopolitical content to target the audience, from social engineering aspect, deepfakes, all this sort of thing, right? To just, impact the state. Third one, we primarily go into like AI weaponization. I use this term a lot because it's going to fall back into the arms race, how they're abusing it with guardrails or without guardrails. So if your LLMs are with guardrails, they are finding bypasses. Like I'm going to abuse certain legitimate LLMs. But on the other hand, we have, malicious kits like, Worm GPT, Fraud GPT, without guardrails. All data is like, unbounded, and you can create whatever you want, and then you can find and stream it. I think that's where the world we are in right now. And that's the kind of attacks we are seeing pretty often right now.
I wonder if maybe one of you could expand on the deep fake threat, and maybe not so much in how it's used in social media to kind of sway public opinion, but in a more specific type of attack for social engineering, right? So using deep fakes to bypass authentication processes when calling in, like I feel like every cybersecurity webinar I do, I have to bring this up, but the MGM hack, right? That's an act of social engineering. How much easier is it if you have deepfake voice, deepfake video to bypass those authentications?
Yeah. So I'll go for it in a quick 30 seconds. So take an example of we used to deal with attacks like CEO spoof email. Right now, I mean, recently we have seen that, some of the problems the CISOs have faced, right? In looking into like some of the deepfake attacks that are actually focusing on the entity of a CEO and throwing up the messaging to their employees. See, one of the thing we need to understand here, like in the context of phishing email, right? You have to read it, you have to click it. In this kind of thing, it's a convincing pattern of your brain power that they actually go after, because audio visual, right? We live into the world of too long didn't read. Small 25-second message can do the much damage as opposed to the others, right? So I think that's where the target plays. But we are seeing that, this change of the context from the standard phishing emails to AI generated phishing emails to now deep fakes, where audio and visual through the pixel manipulation is actually going to the next level, because the convincing argument will be very, very easy to make. And you just click it, you see it, because everybody's flipping, right? It's a flipping world we are in right now. And so you can easily get convinced and you make certain decisions based on that because your brain acts pretty straightforward to it.
And Sean, I would
Yeah.
caution you, don't get wrapped around the axle of trying to defend just deepfakes or smishing or social engineering attacks, because the bad guys are going to do whatever is the least effort for the biggest gain, right? And that's something that sometimes we get lost in when we start spending millions of dollars on detecting their deepfake type things. It doesn't really do you a whole lot of good if you're doing that. The garage door is still open, right? If you didn't close the
Yeah.
windows, if password reuse is still happening. So I'll give you an example. In the Fortune 500 space, I would be venture to guess that probably close to 500 have some kind of phishing campaign where they're teaching their users about phishing, or maybe even internally phishing their users. But they don't necessarily talk about overall the entire threat landscape around that side. And so I think AI is going to change some of that. We know that it already has. It's very trivial for me with a very limited amount of voice samples to be able to fake like I'm somebody else, right? If you think about, hopefully you don't spend too much time on TikTok or Instagram, but the reason that all those videos have the same exact voice is because it's AI.
Yeah.
That actor is not working 10 hours a day recording all the voices from every teenage girl to everybody doing work in their garage. It's all the same person. Well, studies have actually shown that people are trusting of that voice. I mean, think about that. It's
Right,
not
they're
even
used
a
to it
real
now.
person, and studies say people actually trust that voice, right? It sounds like the voice of God is what people have called it before. So
Yeah.
I would caution that, although I think it's fascinating, it's interesting to see the arms race. And again, when we talk about arms race, there's two different inappropriate terms. One is the arms race in the sense of like militaries doing buildups, right? And the other is the cat and mouse game in the sense of Tom and Jerry. I don't know if the cat and mouse really refers to Tom and Jerry, but I've always thought of like Tom and Jerry. Either one of those does not end well, right? In either case, when militaries build up a lot of arms, eventually somebody throws the match that lights the powder keg, so to speak. And the cat and mouse game, both of them get really really good at fighting each other, but they also get really good at attacking others as well, right? So
Mhm.
they've raised their game on that standpoint too. So I think that a lot of the social engineering tools, it's really important to focus on them, but you can't focus exclusively on them. You got to take it holistically.
Yeah, to keep the analogy going, I think of it kind of along the lines of comparing modern conventional warfare to modern drone warfare, right? What we're seeing in
Mhm.
Ukraine, it's almost like a corporation is a tank. It's big. It's maybe got strong defenses. It's got maybe some offensive capabilities. But can it really withstand the attack from a swarm of 100 drones that are coming from all these different angles with all these different ammunitions? That's really, I think, what you're speaking to, Ray, is it's there's more than one vector of attack that they can come from, and they can just overwhelm you, and eventually they're going to get through, right?
Well, let me use that example. So, in the example of what Ukraine did, allegedly, let me just put allegedly by everything I'm about to say, right? What Ukraine allegedly did last year was they sent 100 almost like off the shelf, commercially available, not quite, but close to the things you can buy at Best Buy, put them in the rafters of houses, and shipped them into the enemy territory way beyond the air defenses, way beyond command and control infrastructure, way beyond any kind of encrypted, C2 stuff. Put it right next to some of the nuclear powered arsenal. And those machines were built 70 years ago, way before anyone ever dreamed that someone would be able to mail a missile. Because ultimately, what we're talking about is they mailed a missile, right? And there was no one ever took that into account when they started building these defenses. And I will tell you, every NATO country in the world saw what happened there. And although they were a little bit pleased to see that it was successful, there's also that pucker factor where you're like, whoa, because we haven't built these into our defenses. I guarantee you the people handling the security for the Super Bowl never thought about what if a missile gets mailed, right? Or what if 100 missiles get mailed? Because those are two totally different things if you think about it.
Yeah.
So it is definitely changing the landscape, and we have to be really cautious and careful because what else are we not thinking about? If we haven't been thinking about mailing missiles, what other types of things have we never thought about? And then I'll give the last example on that one is, we never anticipated people would use DNS as a weapon to be able to use DNS for exfiltration, but they certainly can do it. So you kind of have to keep an open mind. The good news is that humans are good at this, but AI is not necessarily as good at being creative with regards to what the possibilities of the threat actors might be.
In cybersecurity space, we used to say like, basics are the hardest part to conquer, right? To err as human, right? So human are prone to errors. I mean, there's a weakest link all across. It doesn't matter AI and all that. If the humans are compromised, everything is done and dusted. So still is the
I guess so. So you just can't rely on AI for everything, right? You're going to build defense in depth. Right, so every layer, right, at the perimeter, what do you need to do? In the inside of the network, what do you need to do? Where are your crown jewels, right? How are you protecting your crown jewels? And, so the east-west traffic. So it's not just about AI. I know this discussion is all about AI, but I think to put together a good, effective strategy, a defensive strategy, you need to have all of those people, process, technology, all of the dimensions of your network, take that into account. Conduct a risk assessment to understand where the risks are, right? Are they at the perimeter? Are they outside? Like Ray just pointed out that, exploiting DNS. So it's not you. And the more and more threats we are seeing are the threats outside the perimeter, right? Your third-party vendor basically takes a copy of your invoice, modifies it, sends it back to you, and you're reacting to it. Yes, the AI did help in coming up with the invoice format and did the scan and found out who the CFO and CTO and the controller are. So I think it's all about, yes, AI is sort of becoming the de facto threat, vulnerability, and also the defense. Exactly. Exactly.
I think what you guys are saying though is that it's not AI is not the threat, right? It is the vehicle or the substrate on which these threats exist and accelerate in today's modern world.
Yeah, but Sanjay, I want to ask you a question, and I'm sorry, Sean, I'm just going to hijack the questioning here because I want to ask you a question. What if, just outside the box thinking, what if the concept of crown jewels is obsolete now? What if the absolute crown jewel of everything in every business is now trust, period? When your customers trust you, when your vendors trust you, that is now the currency, rather than the concept of I'm going to protect this database file because it's got my customers' data and it's got the history and it's got whatever, right? What if it's that the entire currency is that trust, and so now you're having to defend the jewel with the jewel, right?
Yes.
It's sort of a little bit scary on that side. I mean, what do you think, Aditya? What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Ray. I mean, if you look at the basic concept of zero trust when it came, right, I think the idea was like a transferring from the attack surface to the protect surface. So recently, I think last couple of months, we have actually drafted a very fantastic piece of Cloud Security Alliance, and where we talk about zero trust for IoT architectures, right? The concept was entirely being, given by the person who created it, and the target was primarily, transfer the concept of attack surface to the protect surface, which is where you fall into like the crown jewels, right? Because considering the amount of money that need to actually build the attack surface risk assessment and looking into every single asset that's running in your environment is not feasible considering the way, and with AI, it's not going to be possible down the lane. So they said, let's just go for protect surface, go for the critical assets in the system, and then do it. All's going to fall back to defense and depth, right? How deep you want to go, right? So that's like, different models we are still trying. As you said, like, again, it's a world we live in, but we can still keep on trying.
Well, we didn't talk about that. That's part of the acceleration. Sorry, Sanjay, that's part of the acceleration here too, is at the same time that AI is accelerating the threat landscape, but we're also seeing an increase in the perimeter or the surface area that can be attacked because of separate developments and accelerations of technology, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out. Is like, so I did say crown jewels, but the next question is, where are the crown jewels? Right? If you think about 15 years ago, we used to have a physical data center, a server, and we used to store everything on top of it.
And if you physically stole the server, you stole the data, right? You physically put it in the and haul ass, right?
But now, where is your crown jewel? It's in GCP, it's in Azure, it's in SQL, somewhere that you don't even.
My employees, my cloud bots at their house, an apartment residential broadband connection that they didn't firewall.
There you go. So it's basically one of those transformations of where yes, crown jewels is sort of a term we use, but where exactly is it, right? Is it in somebody else's cloud? Is it in your cloud? Is it on-prem? And I think those are some of the things that you need to start thinking about. Is how do you start protecting your crown jewels, which are completely distributed, right? They're basically in somebody else's cloud. Go ahead, Aditya, you have something to say.
So just adding one quick point to it. It's all about the data. They used to say earlier it was data is the new oil.
Sure.
Right now, data is the new critical mineral. And the one
That's right.
into the stage of palladium, gold, silver, and all that. I think whoever controls the data controls the keys to the kingdom these days. This is what it is. What is an AI at the end, right? It's all data processing that is happening. And now we're seeing a lot of litigation systems going through because they never follow the path. So it's still the data in the back end, which form, which flavor it is, it matters. But it's the data these days. Always been, but right now it's much more critical part.
So, Sean, we are almost halfway through this webinar, and no one has said compliance yet. No one's used the C word, right? So let me just break that barrier right now, because there are two schools of thought when it comes to cybersecurity. There is a school of thought that says you must be compliance driven because that's what drives budgets and that's what drives everything else, right? And that security can't be innovation, security can't be an enabler. Let's get through the SOC and let's get through the tick boxes, right? And then there's another side of it that says, no, absolutely, security can be an enabler. We can do things way beyond compliance. The problem is we're under budget. We're way over budget to even hit the compliance box, right? The good news about AI is about 5 years ago, IT spending for networks started going down, but security was going up. So a lot of companies started moving their networks. And by the way, I'm not saying SASE was deliberately written so that people could get past their budgeting cycles, but it didn't hurt, right? It certainly didn't hurt. Now, cybersecurity budgets are being flat or even decreasing, but AI budgets are going way up. So there's not a single board in the United States right now who doesn't have a question every month about what are we doing with AI? Or how are we spending money on this and that? I think someone mentioned before shadow AI, which is generally when an employee is using AI without the authority to do so, right? But there are some companies where they want to know how are my employees using AI because they want to be able to build their own use cases around that side, right? And so I think that we're living in a very, very exciting time. It feels like that rate of change is accelerating because it is. It is. The rate of change of things happening, news stories hitting is absolutely positively that velocity is increasing. And it is logarithmic, which is one of the craziest things about the whole thing is if you're old enough to remember Moore's Law, or if you're old enough to remember when bandwidth was doubling every XYZ days, that's ultimately what's going to end up happening with these models and with the parameters and everything else. Is what's going to get, if we don't get ahead of it, it's going to get ahead of us.
Yeah, I think Moore's Law as applied to AI is probably a quaint idea, right? It's a lot faster than that.
Well, there's one guy that signed 80% of the RAM, or not one guy, one entity, I should say one entity, signed 80% of the RAM in the entire country, right? But they're not even profitable. Like, can you imagine if General Motors had signed a contract for 80% of all the rubber right before World War II, but they weren't even profitable at the time? I'm not quite sure how we let that happen.
Yeah, well, the AI bubble is a separate webinar, but
oh boy,
but
we
I
gotta
do
do it
want to
quick
ask.
because it's gonna burst any minute now. It might burst any second.
But I do want to ask though, and I think we've probably made the case already, but let's just hit it head on. Why are traditional cybersecurity approaches really not appropriate for today's threat landscape?
Well, I'd say one word is reactive. It's reactive. Reactive just isn't going to work. Now, Sanjay's going to tell me, well, we're not reactive. We're proactive. Okay, but you're proactive about things that have already happened, right? So technically, you are being proactive about things, but it is, and I think that's where the models really break. The fastest is you can't be, if you're a company that responds to breaches and tries to decrease dwell time, that makes you really hip and cool, but you've already lost the battle before you even showed up to the game.
That is so true. So I think the proactive and compliance are two words that we use in enterprise companies to sort of protect the company, not the data, not the data that we are collecting, not the PII, PHI, credit card data. It is just to protect the entity. Hey, I am compliant with HIPAA, PCI, and CMMC. By the way, I did my risk assessment. Here's what exactly happened and how much data got stolen has got nothing to do with being compliant or being proactive. These are all hip words, right? So I can get on a soapbox and talk about, all of the Anthem and Equifax and all of the stuff. All the data is already gone. I don't know what we're trying to protect. But anyway, let me stick to this webinar's theme and talk about. So it's one of those things that I think we are just trying to do a checkbox because the velocity of attacks are increasing exponentially every day.
Sure.
And so making sure that we are complying with the law, making sure we can sort of have a proactive posture, I think is the only way to be sane. I think
Yeah.
that would be sort of where I have sort of advised my clients who have, who are doing risk analysis for the first time. They don't even know where the data is, right? IT has come up and did a full digital transformation. And then you're talking about cybersecurity. You didn't bake cybersecurity and compliance into the digital transformation. And after doing all of that, you are now like, oh, I need to make sure that all of my S3 buckets in Amazon are secure. How does that equate to being proactive or compliant? I don't know, but that's basically where we sit as
Well,
we sort of talk to clients.
I think you missed the most important compliance checkbox, which is being compliant with the requirements of your cyber insurance provider, right?
Well,
Someone's going to have to pay when something goes down, right?
yes, that's the only one that has teeth.
Right.
If the cyber insurance company says, I'm going to drop you, guess what? You're going to basically stand up and do whatever you can by the time you get the coverage underwritten.
But
So what?
is that a good guideline though? So like if somebody is kind of overwhelmed with the just kind of the scale of what they have to consider when it comes to a cybersecurity posture, can they follow their cyber insurance guidelines? Can they follow a NIST framework? Is there something out there that they can use as a heuristic or a guide that say, I'm fairly safe. This is my safe harbor. I'm following these guidelines.
I think that's an excellent question. And the answer, the cyber insurance companies are, I believe, 5 years behind the curve.
Mm-hmm.
They're just starting to get to spell immutable backup. They suddenly realize, oh yeah, there's something called immutable backup. They're still not talking about SASE. They're still not talking about zero trust and things like that. So, you can start using cyber insurance recommendation. Most of the cyber insurance underwriters are bringing CISOs to the conversation. Like daily, I'm talking to the CISO of, the big five insurance companies. They're basically bringing that to the conversation. So yes, Sean, I think that is one of the dimensions that you can use. The second dimension I recommend is the regulatory framework that you have to comply depending upon what industry you are in. So I think you just have to take those two into consideration to come up with your roadmap. And of course, the best practices. What is going on in the industry? I think, talking to folks like Aditya and trying to understand where is the product engineering going? What should I be looking at? They may be startups, but I think you can get a lot of good clues into what they have uncovered and what products they're building. So I think going to RSA, going to DEF CON, I think folks, those forums are good to learn. And, hopefully you can become proactive. I think that's the hope.
Right. What are, aside from everything that we just talked about, what are some of the other challenges that CISOs and IT teams are facing right now when it comes to, the increasing attacks?
Yeah, so we have the velocity issue. Okay, we have the number of threat actors. We have the number of ways that they can get in. But I was just thinking when Sanjay was just talking about that, I was just thinking of something else. Because we actually sometimes in cybersecurity, we act like there's this nebulous blob called compliance, and it is very clear cut whether something is compliant or not. But one perfect example of this is this. A few years ago, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago now, NIST announced that making your employees rotate their passwords every 90 days is bad policy. Okay, it makes you less secure, not more secure. It's stupid. It builds distrust, and every employee just changes their thing from spring 2005 to fall spring 2005. Right? Everyone's nodding their heads because we all agree that it's a horrible policy and it doesn't make sense to do so. However, nobody ever asked the question, why do we have passwords at all? Like, why in the world are we still chasing down a better formula for something that is not good, right? And we all can talk about multi-factor and certainly zero trust and things like that, but I think sometimes just keeping the compliance up to date with the buzzwords from 5 years ago, because it sounds like you were saying that they use the Gartner reports from 5 years ago to write the compliance requirements for today. Which
Absolutely.
that's a strategy. I don't know if I would use that one myself, but hey, it's a strategy, right? But maybe we need to throw those out completely and say, okay, what would it look like? Okay, I'm talking about teenage kids. Teenage kids authenticate themselves 700 or 800 times a day, right? 700 or 800 times a day, they authenticate to their phones, if it be a Face ID, Thumb ID, just to their friends, whatever else that is. What would that look like if you never had to type in your password, and you certainly never had to type in your long password, right? So my kids have a PIN, a 4-digit or 6-digit PIN, and then they've got a long one that's, daddy's requirements for secure or whatever, based on daddy seeing rainbow tables 20 years ago, which are probably obsolete now. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion. I think we need to look at some of the bigger questions, which are, why are we assuming that the way it's been done in the past is even going to be appropriate for the way it's in the future? So if I want to go by Sanjay's guidelines, I've got to be thinking in terms of, I need to write standards now that 5 years from now, the insurance compliance officers are going to require, right? Well, I can't even tell you what the threat landscape is going to look like next month.
Mhm.
So how would I, Sean, I did not answer your question, but we're getting really dorm room 3 a.m. philosophical on this webinar, and I think that's what people signed up for.
No, I think that's important. What's that old quote, that Henry Ford quote? If I asked people what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse, right?
Yeah.
That's
So
horse, yes.
we can't be iterating on the things that we did in the past just because that's what we did in the past when we're living in a completely different world, right? With a
Mhm.
completely different type of technology that's
So let me tie it back to the
crazy.
call center side. The call center side. So I am now calling my call center because my password's been locked out. Okay, and they're using some type of RAG authentication, some type of LLM to look up whether they can reset my password or not. And they're using some type of voice recognition, I hope. But guess what it all comes down to? They then throw out knowledge-based answers, and they say, "What year did you graduate? Or not what year, but name a street you grew up on, or the first concert you went to, or some
Mhm.
other equally easy to look up via OSINT answers and questions, right?" So it was all looking pretty good there for a minute. You had all these tools, but then you really got down to me authenticating who I am, and you use things that are very easy to spoof and have been since caller ID became broken open a few years back. So that I think that we have to kind of look at that from the holistic, larger view to it, because what we're doing now isn't working, and it's certainly not going to work at scale.
And that's exactly what you were talking about before, is right. There's AI can be used from multiple vectors in the same motion, right? It could fake your voice. You could purchase that data about people online, put that in an LLM, and have that answered with an AI generated voice real time, right? So it's a lot easier to kind of defeat the old protections that we've had in place. But you're right, right? You didn't answer my question. What are some of the challenges that IT teams and CISOs are facing? And the things that I'm thinking about specifically are like threat fatigue. There's so
Sure.
many threats out there. What are they responding to? When do they respond? Or tool sprawl. We've had webinars in the past where we've talked about the challenge of having so many different tools with so much overlapping functionality. And we talked about it mostly in the context of cost savings, right? But
Sure.
does that also create a potential problem where you've got so many different layers that you're missing things that are, you've got gaps that you're not seeing?
So Sean, there are like another additional aspect to it. We're talking more about like AI weaponization in the last 30 minutes as well, but we also need to talk about AI productivity in the context of cybersecurity. I can give you one like practical examples that we have actually put across in our Aryaka, like when we build threat intelligence, we need to clean up command and control intelligence patterns and all that. So earlier it was taking 3-4 people, but right now what we did with the AI agents, everything is going on the fly, picking up, cleaning it up, and things like that. Person come in, look into it, and get the things done. So the point here is that, in a nutshell, can we use AI to fight AI? Right? That's also important. But the CISO they are facing, because they have to actually push the teams across the understanding the productivity enhancement that AI is giving you. There's no doubt in that. There is no doubt in that. People saying, no, it is there. You're going to do a lot of things upfront on the fly if you want to, rather than, for example, SOC, right? You want to check deviations. AI can help you to pick deviations on the fly because you have data sets inside your private cloud and you can make it happen. You don't need to go make it public, all those sort of things, right? But the point I'm trying to, we understand the threat landscape that is changing, as Ray mentioned, and Sanjay touched on that as well. But we also need look into the aspect of like, can we use AI to increase our productivity? And that's where the ROI is. ROI is not in stopping the attack. To some extent, it's there when you talk about metrics. But again, it's the AI that's going to help those metrics to tame it down. Like, what is your containment time is, right? For any specific threat. If you reduce by 5 minutes, it's a significant ROI.
Yeah, we buried the lead this whole webinar up until now, and the lead is that AI is an accelerant to the problem, but it's also potentially the solution, right? So let's get into that part of the conversation. What does the landscape of AI as a defense look like today?
I think AI for the good guys is making them better and better in terms of detecting, right? If you think about the SOC 10 years ago, there used to be an analyst, and the analyst used to be looking at the anomalous packets coming across. And if that person actually stepped out for a break and a new stream started that had parts and pieces of a threat coming into the company, they would get lost because that was the guide, right? That person's memory was the persistent memory that knew, hey, the first 5 packets had come in, but the rest of it, I don't know when they were going to come in. What AI brings to the table is the ability to process voluminous data and detect the anomalous packets coming in. And that allows you to act much more proactively. I guess I'm using the same word again, but in a quicker manner. So I believe that AI in the good hands, right? All the EDR, MDR, SASE vendors, they're starting to do a pretty good job of using AI, LLMs to detect anomalous traffic, to detect malware coming into, to actually able to identify and isolate different endpoints or different users who actually have this data. So from that perspective, I think we are starting to get our game back. I think for some time, for about 2 to 3 years, we were getting overwhelmed. But I believe that the startup environment in the US is starting to get the mojo back into the AI products. That's helping the CISO get to the forefront.
So Sanjay, you get to say something good. I get to say something bad. I mean, that's just how this goes, okay? That's great news, and I'm happy for you. I'm really happy for you. That's good. However, one of the keys to solving a lot of the problems that we've almost solved in the last 10 years anyway has been identity, okay? Understanding what roles people play. And agentic AI, things like this open Claudebot thing, right, ever blows that concept out of the window.
Absolutely.
Okay? So somebody was talking about shadow AI before. I would like to talk to you about shadow API. And that is, if I had a company decide I don't want to give you an API, you'll just go make one yourself. You'll just hack one together in your garage, right? And so that's the good and the bad news. This is your good news. I'm just going to tell you that there's different challenges. They're just different.
Yeah. So
No, but even IAM products, actually, IAM products is also basically starting to account for all the, so if I'm deploying 100 or 200 or 1,000 agentic AI bots to do to enhance my accounts payable, accounts receivable. So I'm not even talking about security and IT. I'm talking about usage of AI in other departments. What is the identity of those agents? Right. So all of the IAM products are starting to take into account that if a new agent starts to spin up, is that a whitelisted agent or not? Right. And shut it down.
God, no.
Well, and I want to go to Aditya because he had something to say, but I just want to respond to that. It seems like AI is better at pattern recognition than us, right? So it seems like an AI would be able to recognize a new AI that may be a threat that's kind of entering the chat, right? But
you're assuming they would want to, though. We haven't even talked about good faith or bad faith yet. But yeah, let's hear from Aditya. I want to hear that side of it.
Yeah. So I think that I just, pinpoint this scenario into a different way. Like, for example, if we go about like asset management and the risk framework that are associated with it, just add another entity of an AI agent or bot into it. But if you are a solution provider sitting in the network, it's still a network traffic for you. Or protocol, different things, different patterns. It's not going to make any difference at the network level if you know the protocols in play and all that. When it comes to identity, how you map that identity is just the extension of your existing asset manager with the new entity, which is an AI agent or AI bot and all those sort of things, right? And I think that's kind of thing where we are. I think when we look into this scenario, I categorize from AI productivity point of view and like the way AI agents are consumed into 3 parts. If I'm deploying AI solutions, I think, is it impacting or increasing my security efficacy of products? Second one is like orchestrating AI into operational efficiency. Can I do that through automation? Third is it allowing me to reduce the threat landscape through the timing constraints, which means like mean threat detection, MTTD, MTDR, automated containment, timing, and all that. I think these metrics can translate back to the ROI, which is further translated into the compliance, budget, and everything up. I think that's the kind of thought process we need to ensure. And I completely agree with Ray and Sanjay from different aspects to it. But also, again, at the network level is still the traffic. I mean, why certain companies are making a lot of money, why they're saying certain solution providers going to be, because at the end, somebody has to process the AI-related traffic at some part of time.
So, Aditya, that's a great answer, but did you use AI to write that answer? I mean, can we see your screen? Can you bring it?
No. I have actually drafted 2 books on AI, so I don't.
Okay. But I'm just saying that
That's
that is one thing
awesome.
we have to take into account is the fact that yes, there's these frameworks and these models, but none of our models are ever built on the assumption that the supervisor and the supervisee might be the same exact entity, right? They may
True.
be the same, and we all know how well self-supervision works. If not,
That's true.
tell your toddler that they can self-parent themselves for the weekend and
And
give them the key car keys, right?
I just
So
want
that's one thing we got to take into account. But I'd love that answer. I just wanted to just blatantly accuse you of using AI to write it.
It sounds like a design flaw to have an AI policing itself, right?
But it's not even policing itself. It's basically policing a clone of itself, right? So in the identity framework, there are times when you might have two roles. Like I might be the role of player coach, or I might be the
Mm.
role, yeah, player coach will work there, right? But it's not two separate entities that's
Right.
exactly Ray coaching exactly Ray. That's science fiction stuff, right? We don't even really know how that would work. If you got into a fight with yourself from a year ago, who's going to win? Well, hopefully I'm going to win because I'm in better shape, right? But if you knew you were doing that next year, then that kind of changes the equation a little bit. All of these things are really kind of science fiction, mind-boggling 3 a.m. dorm room conversations, but they're actually happening right now in the real world. These are actually going on, in enterprises and marketplaces. And the reason we know that, for example, is because the person in charge of identity from Facebook just said the other day that she turned on an agentic AI in her own house and it started deleting her files. Well, I would argue that maybe her files need to be deleted.
Anyway, right. Yeah, exactly.
very sarcastic addition to what you just said. I mean, but cybersecurity is dead, right? We don't need it.
Yes,
I
we
think
don't need
more
it.
than that. You're giving your AI agent access to who's going to monitor it, so who's going to have a visibility, observability,
That's
all
true.
that aspect to it. People are just going crazy and nuts, like, AI. These are not the easy way. I think we're entering into much different territory where cybersecurity is much more needed, even when AI is being consumed by nation state adversaries. So it's just hooplas of marketing, what they're saying, but eventually the real play is something different. There will be impacted few industries, but not on the overall cybersecurity play.
All right, guys, I want to take the
That's true.
conversation out of the what did you call the 3 a.m. dorm room conversation and
Okay.
into the board.
Philosophical. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
let's
yes.
move it to the boardroom for a second. And let's just get practical for the people that are listening, right? So, and maybe starting with you, Sanjay, could you tell us for the people listening to this, where should they start if they want to look at AI as a solution, AI-driven security tools?
I think there are multiple answers. So I'll go with conventional answers. Yes, set up an AI governance, or, write the policy, make sure that the procurement process includes all of the vendors that are coming in, that, if they're using AI, how they're using AI, and all of those kind of things. But I think the cynical version of the answer is we already have so much AI embedded in our companies that we need to first identify existing vendors without telling the company have already deployed AI into their tools. And where is that data going? All of the data that's getting synthesized, that is being exfiltrated under the training objectives. Where is the data going? Who owns the data after the data gets synthesized? So the right answer is yes, have a governance framework, use like a NIST AI RMF framework to understand how are you going to put processes to manage the I guess the swamp of AI that's coming in right now. But from their perspective, I think education of the board members, education of your executive teams, those are two critical items. I've attended multiple board meetings in the last 3 years where the board member, one of them will walk in, it's like, hey, are we doing AI? And everybody look at each other, it's like, oh, we should do AI, right? And they will tell the CEO and the CIO, go do some AI and come back in the next quarter and report. The poor CIO is like, I don't even have any use cases to do AI. The business people haven't given me. So there's a broader discussion around education of AI, right? I think that has to happen at multiple levels. The successful projects that I've seen from an AI perspective is where there are well-defined AI use cases. There is existing data points in terms of how quickly things are getting done and how will this AI make productivity improvements. So until unless AI can be defined, until unless AI use cases can be identified and proven, this is just an exercise in marketing. Everybody keeps talking about how I have AI, you have AI, are you using AI? So it's one of those that, yes, there is a lot of work being done. but how is it getting converted into revenue enhancement, or revenue protection? I think those are some of the things that we need to start looking into.
I know my fellow marketers deserve all the cynicism that we get for slapping AI on everything and contributing to the problem of
I
global
didn't realize that. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I
Hey,
take
John, I
that
will just
bullet.
say some of the questions that Sanjay is asking. Two things to point out. Number one, I think he took us back to the dorm room a little bit there, just a little bit. I think he took us back to the dorm room. And then number two, aren't you glad that this is part one of a 17-part series? This call
Yeah,
today is because we
yeah,
got a lot more to
Yes,
get to.
yeah, we absolutely
absolutely.
do. But from a provider perspective, I'll start with Aditya, and I want to hear from you too, Ray. But how are you implementing AI in your services and tools?
Yeah. So my perspective, so when I sat with my team, a couple of months back, so we initiated a self-attestation process for enhancing productivity, right? I mean, because we know what is coming, and you all know like what is happening in the wild when your training teams are getting shrinked, right? And we did get impacted as well. That's not an issue. But the problem is that how you can perform. It's a self-attestation play. Let's say, for example, if I want to write some signatures or intelligence-driven patterns, can I use AI, right? Because see, if you go for writing a signature from a scratch and then you feed things like that, no. With an AI, now the way we have built agentic system and all that, you can actually draft signatures like in hundreds on the fly, and you can test it fast, recover it fast. So this actually enhances the productivity, and we are writing much faster our threat research reports and all that. It's just not like explaining. We are doing actual research like in our lab and everything up, but the top layer where we need to actually construct an argument or explanation, we don't need to go into a scratch play, right? We need to go into enhancing the AI, so that productivity has bumped up significantly. So I just continue what Sanjay said, like from the education, which is a very, very important part. People have no clue about what AI workloads are, and we're talking about AI in the cloud, right? So those kind of scenarios and challenges we are facing. But if CISOs can come up with the point of like self-attestation play, like with different, constructs and verticals in a company, and say, with these AI services, let's just available publicly, how you can actually improve your productivity, how you can actually go for it if you use it, and then go from there rather than buying solution on the fly, which are definitely needed for enterprise risk level, but not the individual level where they can actually increase the productivity. And that's where I think where the ROI comes from. And then you can have any matrix or framework defined to fix that in.
How about you, Ray? How's Comcast Business adopting AI, and particularly in the cybersecurity practice?
I knew this question was going to come up today because it always does come up. And the proper answer is I'm supposed to tell you that there's three major categories that we're using this to increase productivity and change the customer experience. But the bottom line is this: we're using it everywhere. Okay, whether we like it or not, it's everywhere. It's touching every single sales proposal, every single spam-looking email, every single non-spam-looking email, even this webinar itself, right? Even the scheduling of all of the pieces and pre-calls and all that stuff. It's pervasive. Like asking where this technology is touching is somewhat, I know everyone wants to hear the use cases, and there are definitely use cases for it. And I would actually give you there's negative use cases too, because one of the number one things that we have not talked about today is you don't want your biases to be influenced in your go forward models either, right? Just because
We
you've done
don't have
things
any
way.
biases, Ray. We don't have any
Well, thank
biases.
God we use AI to clean them out, right? And
That's
now we can move
right.
on to part two of 17 parts of the dorm room series. We got to call them the dorm room series. It must be called the dorm room series, right? But I'm more interested in what companies are doing, what my customers are doing. And my customers are doing some really novel stuff. Now, I'm not going to tell you examples of that one, but they would absolutely love to, I'm sure. They would not love it if I did. But we're seeing some really neat stuff in the fast food industries, in the law firms, even in psychology. Like I know nobody ever wants to talk about having an AI therapist, but people are actually using this as a as a surrogate, not surrogate. What's that other word? But anyway, as an extension to their
Mhm.
talk therapist, their talk therapist. And that part's pretty cool. I mean, as a fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation, I always wanted a holodeck and I always wanted a Data. The robot was named Data, right? And we're getting closer to having that. And I'll tell you more about that at 3 a.m. in the dorm room.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Guys, we're getting close to the end here, so I want to cut right to what I think personally might be the most important question here, which is how can somebody that understands the challenges that they're facing today in their business as related to cybersecurity, as being compounded by AI, how can they justify the cost of AI-powered solutions? How do they talk in the boardroom to secure the investment? And how do they do it in a defensible way? Meaning, how can they make sure that there's an appropriate expectation of ROI? Sanjay, I'm going to start with you on that one.
I think, going back to what I already just said is education. I think we need to educate everybody as to what AI is actually bringing to the table. We also, if I'm the CISO of a company, I need to understand what this AI enabled product is doing and helping my team. And so productivity, reduction in risk. I think so. We need to, of course, understand what the product is, but we also need to understand how are we going to take this in a non-tech speak and relate it back to the board and the executives and the peers to understand what this technology is doing. And if there is a delta in, if I'm asking for more money, 10% more than last year, how will this 10% investment actually impact in reducing the risk on the overall enterprise and also help in increasing revenue and competitiveness? So I think those folks are actually looking for different words than what techies like us on the table are used to talking to. So I think that there has to be a little bit of that discussion and then take it back to the boardroom.
And it sounds like step one there might be identifying and quantifying risk.
Sure.
That's true. Yes, absolutely.
Aditya, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, so sure. I think this is a very timely question here as well. So my suggestion and sharing my feedback with my CISO's friend here is very simple. You have to see in boardrooms, we all know that numbers matter, right? It's always easy to show the numbers and convey your point. So we believe that, from CISO's construct a certain framework, which is not too long or too short, a structured one, which has a lot of metrics in it. And then simple mapping needs to be presented from a previous traditional security tools with the AI power tools and showcase the power, how exactly the numbers have enhanced. Like, for example, we detected hundreds of attacks in 5 hours, but with AI power solution, we detected hundreds of thousands of deviations in a 1 hour. I'm just giving an example, right? And then you project those numbers, and then the delta, which just Sanjay mentioned, right? The delta is going to speak of itself. And then where we can actually extend this process to the next level if we get some more budget here. So I think the numbers and the weight is, the technology has to be translated into the form of numbers to showcase the power of AI at that level I'm talking about, not with the techies. Techies know what is happening. So I think that's how I see it. A good framework with metrics, showcasing and comparative metrics about previous traditional security tools and some of the processes you have earlier and how it has been enhanced with AI, mapping with numbers going to be a key to the conversation.
Sean, I like both those answers so much that I'm going to disagree with both of them and tell you that if you're attending this webinar and you're trying to figure out how to do this, I would suggest that you don't. Lean on your vendors, lean on Amplix, lean on Aryaka, have them help you get that prepared.
Absolutely.
And have them do that work for you. Because we've done this before. And if you haven't done this before, it's a little bit daunting of a task. So the knowledge that you just heard kind of wrote it off here, I'm not diminishing it in any return, but I'm saying don't put that burden on yourself because there's a lot of folks that will help you do it.
Thanks, Ray. I see that you received the check in the mail and signed it.
Yes, I was going to mail my part of it, actually.
It was written in Bitcoin for some reason. I don't know exactly what.
I'm going to go off script for just a second and ask a question. But before I do, we're going to wrap up in a second. So anyone that's listening that has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat here. We usually don't get questions. I would love it if we got a couple today. We've got a great group. So this is just a personal question for me. But right now, as we're recording this, we've got the U.S. has a carrier strike group off the coast of Iran, and they've got noted offensive cybersecurity capabilities. Anybody that's involved in infrastructure probably is already aware of the threats and understands that they may be a target. But is there a practical implication? Because you've all spoken about state-sponsored and state actors involved in cybercrime and cyber attacks. So is there a practical threat to enterprises today?
Related to AI or related to, are you talking about just about SCADA, things like that?
Both related to geopolitical tensions, let's say.
Yeah, so I would tell you that 100% the lines are blurring between what's a national asset. Even on this call, I was realizing that there are some things that we didn't typically think about as national assets that we probably should be, right? But in the geopolitical space that's there, I think that some of the most interesting things that are going on in Iran has to do with the use of AI. I don't know if you've been following this story about Palantir and this drone company that's there. But basically, one of the AI frontier models has said, we just want you to tell us what you're using us for because we're allowed to have access to your information networks. And that's going to be a real sticky one. That's a 30-part webinar coming up as far as I'm concerned. And
my perception, this is quite clear, right? I mean, if you look at in in the last year, right, the way cybersecurity has actually been a part of a group of companies which are being like tied to the national security, apart from all the arms one, right? All cybersecurity now a part of it. People believe it or not, but that's the case, is right. Anything happens, it's a national security. But take an example of, let's say, Lockheed Martin. They're still an enterprise to a certain extent, but they are building products for certain different kind of stuff like military and all that, right? And why not they're going to use AI for targeting these companies? It's happening all across, because the more they want to go deep into it, but persistence is the most important part in nation state infection mechanism. It's not like, they're going to just distribute some infections and move out. No, they want to stay there for a longer period of time. For that, they need much more advanced, code. They can use AI to build polymorphism into the next level,
Sure.
and use a lot of cryptographic algorithms to do that. All I'm trying to highlight here is that at the end of the day, as Ray said, the line is getting blurred. But eventually, a data is the data. Whether it's an enterprise belongs to your nation, it's at the end of somewhere national data when it's building products like that. And I think we have been touching on this topic a lot recently when we released our latest cyber campaign that we discovered in Asia region. But I think it's a very different problem at the moment.
Yeah. My very last question is just for Ray. Ray, Comcast owns the Philadelphia Flyers. I am a Flyers fan. Who can I complain to about how they're playing?
Oh, I thought you were asking about tickets. I jumped ahead. My predictive model predicted the wrong types of things. We're going to definitely take that offline. And when I say offline, I mean it's going to be a signal using a one-way keypad, and there will be no repeatability whatsoever.
You got it. I appreciate that. All right, gentlemen, thank you
Yes.
so much for your time and expertise. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
This was a lot of
Absolutely.
fun. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Sean,
Bye.
Ray, Aditya. Nice meeting you guys.
Maybe